Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going over all the new Aetherdrift spoilers that just came out today, all the new combos, synergies coming to standard and older formats. A ton of new cards got spoiled today. So let's jump right into it with the big one, the Aetherspark. Everybody's wondering what this does. Well, we now know it's a 4 mana legendary artifact planeswalker equipment. Starts with 4 loyalty, and it says as long as the Aetherspark is attached to a creature, it can't be attacked and has whenever equipped creature deals combat damage during your turn, put that many loyalty counters on the Aetherspark. +1 to attach it to up to one target creature you control and put a +1/+1 counter on the creature. -5, draw 2 cards, and -10, add 10 mana of any one color. So the kind of that 10 mana of any one color is kind of the big payoff here. This is a really interesting card. We've never gotten a Planeswalker that is an artifact, never got a Planeswalker that is an equipment, and it's kind of nice that it can't be attacked. That was kind of my fear with this card. Like you put it on a creature and then they just attack it and it would go away. But if you put it on a creature, they can't attack it, and it gets a ton of more loyalty if the creature does extra damage. So I was thinking, like, how would this actually play out? Let's say you have like a 3 mana 4/4, right? You could even do it on turn 2 if you have Landwar Elves on turn 1. But let's just say you played Bloated Contaminator, which is kind of a nice one here. And then turn 4, you played Aetherspark. You +1'd it, equipped it onto the Bloated Contaminator. Now it's a 5/5, right? Because it gets the +1/+1 counter. Um, you attack. Aetherspark also has 5 loyalty now, right? So you attack with the Contaminator, and let's say it hits them for 5, and you do 5 damage to them. That would put 5 more counters on the Aetherspark. So then it would have 10. You could proliferate and add another one and another counter to the Contaminator, which would be kind of cool. So there's some nice synergy between just those two cards. But any sort of 3 mana 4/4 would get you to 10 counters on the Aetherspark the turn that you played if you played it attacked and got in with the creature. So that can get you to 10, and then the following turn you could, because it can't be attacked, you could use all the loyalty right away to get 10 mana and play, say, Portal of Phyrexia, anything for 10 mana. So this card seems like it has a pretty high upside potential. I don't know. In the average case of this card, I'm not sure actually how good it is. It could just be kind of like a worse like Innkeeper's Talent where it just puts a +1/+1 counter every turn on a creature. But it can potentially get a lot more loyalty, and it does have the -5 to draw extra cards, which is interesting as well. So this is just an interesting card and kind of hard to evaluate, but I think it has some potential. I mean, obviously you want to play this in kind of an aggressive deck or a creature deck because you really want to be able to get in and get extra loyalty on this. But then in an aggressive deck, you don't really have uses for like 10 extra mana. Maybe there's some creatures with like activated abilities. I mean, there's a lot in the set that you can kind of use that mana with. So maybe there's that. Drawing cards never hurts. It's just a really interesting card. It is an equipment too, which you can search up with Kellen, the birthright boon. So that is cool to kind of pay attention to. It's an equipment. It's also an artifact, so that could trigger artifact synergy as well. So it's interesting. I don't know. Is it worth the 4 mana? I think it's got a shot. It's not like a card you just would throw in every deck. Obviously, you need um, a kind of a creature curve for this to be good, or at least 3 drops that work well with it. I would say for it to be good and useful. It does trigger kind of like Valiant every turn on like the Mice deck, but again, 4 mana might be too much for that. Um, and Innkeeper's Talent probably just a better card in that situation, but it is interesting for sure. So I guess we'll kind of have to see. I think it's not like super broken or anything like that, but I think it's got some potential. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, next up, think this card's pretty good. Loot the Pathfinder, which is 5 mana, green, blue, red, and 2 colorless. Legendary creature, Beast Noble. Loot is back. It's a 2/4. It has double strike, vigilance, and haste. And this new ability, which is Exhaust, which means you can only use the ability once. Um, so green in a tap to add 3 mana of any one color, blue in a tap, draw 3 cards, red in a tap, 3 damage to any target. Very cool abilities, very cool, 3 of each kind of um, type line here. I think it's got, just on its own, it's a decent power level card. Like you could, just use this to draw 3 cards and do 3 damage. Uh, get in there. It has vigilance, so you can attack, and then during your combat step, you could use it to like kill a blocker. Pretty hard to block. So definitely an interesting card, but I think it also has some combo potential here with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I'm going to probably say that card a lot throughout this review because that card works with a lot of cards. There's tons of creatures with activated abilities in the set. So putting it on a Soul Cauldron, I think is gonna be a meme for this set. But lots of cards that work well with that. You got the Urborg Scavengers, which could also work well here because Double Strike, Vigilance, and Haste are all really good abilities that you want for your Scavenger to have. So that could be another potential home where you just kind of discard it and then get it on your Scavenger, attack right away, get another card underneath the Scavenger. Um, so yeah, I think in that deck it has some potential. And then every time you blink something with an exhaust, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe it comes back and then you can use the exhaust abilities again. Um, there's also some other card that I think can help you use exhaust abilities more than once. Um, but I think just kind of as a rules way of using them again, you can, if you blink a creature like loot, you can then use it again. So you could use all three of the abilities, then blink it with Splash Portal, and then use it again. So that's kind of cool. So there's definitely some like combo potential there. Maybe where you're just like blinking the loot a bunch and then using it for mana, using it to draw cards. Like I could kind of see maybe some sort of combo deck working with just blinking loot a bunch and winning that way. So um, certainly an interesting card. I think pretty powerful in a lot of different contexts. So definitely a card to kind of keep an eye on for this set. All right, so that's loot. Let's go to the Medicant Core, the guideline, which is a 2 mana, blue and white legendary artifact creature robot. Got some robots in Magic now. Its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control, and it has this new mechanic, start your engines. Very interesting mechanic. It says if you have no speed, it starts at 1, and it increases each turn that your opponent loses life, only during your turn. Max speed is 4, and so a lot of the cards with start your engines are like you want to get to max speed, because it's a racing set. You want to, go fast. Obviously, got to go fast. So max speed is whenever you cast an artifact spell, you can pay 1 if you do copy it. So that's interesting, and I'm kind of skeptical when I looked at a lot of the start of the engine cards. How realistic is it to actually get to the max speed? So you play this, it starts as 1, then you got to do damage to your opponent. Go to 2, the next turn you got to do damage again. Go to 3, then the next turn do damage again. It goes to 4, and then you can start to get the benefits from it. It feels like kind of slow, and like your opponent would probably have an answer to your creature or what you're doing. By the time you get to max speed, I don't know. We'll have to see how these play out. At least in constructed, maybe limited to be easier. But this card is so. I think you have to evaluate these cards. Like, what is it like without the max speed ability? And then is that kind of just like a flavor text extra bonus on it? Because it feels like turning it on is challenging. And maybe there's some other cards that help in the set or that kind of just like enable all your max speeds right away. We'll see. But on its own, it's kind of interesting card. It could be a 2 mana, say like a 5/3 or something like that if you had 5 artifacts in play. That's certainly possible, and that actually is pretty strong. Um, Being able to start your engine too is useful with other cards that have start your engine, because then the engine continues to go up. Weird way to say it. The engine continues to go up throughout the game. It kind of just sits there, kind of like an emblem, I believe. So if you have another one and you've already hit max speed and you play another card with max speed, then it's already enabled. So Spyglass Siren seems kind of nice with this guy, just because it creates an artifact, and then it's a creature with evasion. So if you played on 1 and you played this on 2, you get in for 1 damage. It goes up to 2, and then creatures with evasion seem like a good way to start your engines, basically, to continue to get up to max speed quickly. And then the Novice Inspector, kind of the same thing, also an artifact, also could attack on turn 2. And then any other artifact sort of synergies. Obviously, artifact lands in older formats. There's an artifact land, a clue land in standard, but artifact tokens I think are a nice way to pump this guy as well. Then the max speed abilities. Obviously, you want to be casting an artifact spell itself to copy it. But again, I don't know if how much you want to rely on that. So kind of an interesting mechanic, interesting card. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about this one as well. Okay, next up, so this is another Start Your Engines card as a land. So a few of the lands have Start Your Engines. This one is the rare land. There's some other common lands I think that have that as well. This one taps for colorless, but exciting. If you get max speed, this adds 2 mana. So any land that taps for 2 mana is quite exciting. I was thinking this could be kind of cool with like Gingerbrute, because if you go turn 1, play this land, it starts your engine, gets to 1. Play Gingerbrute, attack, it goes to 2 right away, and then Gingerbrute itself kind of has this evasion ability, so you could kind of get to max speed pretty quickly. So that would be turn 1. Turn 2, you could get 3 counters, and then right turn 3, you could have 4. You could get up to 4 if you did turn 1 this into Gingerbrute, and you got in every turn with for damage. I believe so. Um, so and then you'd have this be able to tap for 2, and all your max speed kind of get turned on. So again, I kind of feel like you could play that. The Raceway would be hard to cast this Medicant Core, but you could maybe play this in the same deck because Gingerbrute is an artifact. Um, there's also another new card on the slide, the Far Fortune End Boss, which is a 4 mana 4/5 with Start Your Engines. Whenever you attack, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Max speed of a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent. The opponent controls so deals that much damage +1. So kind of increasing damage. That card seems pretty cool as well. And again, it kind of feels like Start Your Engines. You kind of want to put them all in the same deck. And this card, the Far Fortune, um, works well because it pings your opponent, so it kind of will be able to trigger the Start Your Engines right away. So maybe this is a pretty good support card for Start Your Engines deck. That's kind of what I'm thinking. You would want to kind of put them all in the same deck, and because once you get your max speed, all your other cards turn on, and then they're all really powerful. So that's kind of the idea I'm thinking. So I'm definitely gonna probably try out a Start Your Engines deck and just jam them all together and see what happens. But I think Gingerbrute might be an interesting addition to that kind of deck. All right, next up we've got Redshift Rocketeer Chief, which is a red and a green legendary creature goblin pilot. So goblin, good to note, a relevant creature type in many formats. It's a 2/3, has vigilance. Tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is its power. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. So again, kind of the activated abilities theme. There's a lot of that kind of theme in here. And then 12 mana to put any number of permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. You can only do that once, and that's kind of interesting. I mean, if you're going to pay 12 mana, I feel like going to be able to put permanents from your hand into play anyways. But his first ability works with the second ability, and again goes into Soul Cauldron kind of nicely. It does go infinite too with the Sleep Cursed Fae and Soul Cauldron combo. Here, it's another creature that taps to add 2 mana or any mana equal to the power of the creature. So if you had this underneath the Soul Cauldron and you had a Sleep Cursed Fae, you could tap the Fae for probably like 4 mana and then untap it for 2, and then go infinite, have infinite mana. For activated abilities only, you could use the Exhaust ability and put everything from your hand into play. And then if you had a creature with an activated ability that could kill your opponent, you could do something like that. So maybe it kind of goes in that sort of deck, which is sort of a fringe combo deck in standard. Also goes infinite with other old cards such as Freed from the Real, which you can tap 1 mana to untap it, or Umber Mantle, because Umber Mantle gives it 2 additional power. It'll tap for 4 mana, and then you can get infinite mana, but it is only mana for activated abilities. So, but some interesting 2-card infinite combo potential as well. So, pretty cool card. A card to keep an eye on. I'm not sure just how good it is. Again, the activated ability sort of strategy synergies in standard are interesting, and it seems like goblins got a lot of it. So, and a card to keep an eye on. We'll see how good it ends up being. All right. Speaking of activated abilities, this is, I think, kind of the Goblin Mobile, the Boom Mobile. 4 mana for a artifact vehicle. And it says when this vehicle enters, add 4 mana of any one color, spend this mana only to activate abilities. And it has an exhaust ability itself. 3 mana and an X that it deals X damage to any target, put a +1/+1 counter on the vehicle. So it's a 5/5 and cruise for 2. But the interesting part, I think, of this card is its enters ability, enters the battlefield ability, and the exhaust ability, both of which kind of want you to blink it. I feel like so. There's like Abuelo, and there's lots of ways that there are quite a few ways to blink artifacts. Abuelo could do it every turn. Nahiri's Resolve also could blink an artifact every turn. You would essentially get the 4 mana and be able to exhaust it again every single time you did this. So that could be pretty good, especially like Nahiri's Resolve, since it doesn't require any mana itself. You could every turn you come back and you could um, essentially use its exhaust ability and do damage to any target every single turn. So maybe some interesting synergy there with blinking this thing. Not sure. Um, yeah, so that's the Boom Mobile. All right. Next up, we've got Kadora, the Heart of Alakria. Okay, good job. Um, 4 mana for a 4/2 legendary human knight, and when it enters, you can search your library for a mount or vehicle card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And if one or more +1/+1 encounters will be put on creature or vehicle you control, that many +1/+1 encounters are put on it instead. So this card kind of synergizes with two different strategies, like sort of the mounts and vehicle cards that let you search up, and that's pretty good. Anytime there's like a tutor on a body, that's always quite powerful. And it also works with +1/+1 counter synergies. So a lot of kind of cool stuff. And there are some cards such as the Orny Tumblewag, which is both a mount, which you could search up to this, and works really well with +1/+1 counters, because it puts +1/+1 counters on it, and it could also double up +1/+1 counters. So it could go in sort of that synergy deck. Miriam also puts +1/+1 counters and works well with mounts and vehicles. So maybe there's this green white sort of synergy deck with mounts and vehicles coming together. Um, Not sure, but it seems like it kind of slots into that sort of strategy pretty easily. All right, next up we've got the Bulwark Ox, which is a 2 mana Ox mount. And whenever this creature attacks while saddled, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So again, this kind of would go in this same sort of green-white mount counter strategy. Sacrifice it. Creatures you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible. Kind of nice against some meta sweepers, except for Sunfall, which just gets everything and makes this a lot worse. But has saddle for 1, and then is a 2/2. So again, having saddle is useful in the sense of like survival creatures in standard, like the veteran survivor, other survivor creatures. That need to be tapped. This is just an easy way to tap it and maybe get some extra value of just +1/+1 counters. It is also an Ox. I noticed this is an Ox with Bruce Tarl, which gives all your Oxens double strike. Now, there's like hardly any Ox in standard, but this is a new Ox. Maybe we're getting it even more. And so might want to make your Bruce Tarl decks now with your Ox synergies. So double strike is no joke. Yeah, this card is interesting. I don't know how good it is, but um, it's interesting just to note that it's sort of a 2 mana saddle card, and again, potentially works well sort of in this green white strategy, and also an Ox strategy. Okay, we've got Zahur Glory's Past, which is a white and a black legendary zombie cat warrior with start your engines and sacrifice another creature, surveil 1, activate only once each turn. Boo! I hate that text, but they didn't want to give us another unlimited sacrifice uh, engine, I guess, card. It has max speed. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So that's powerful. If you can get to the max speed, again, I'm kind of like confused. The start your engines card seems to be in like all different colors. So I'm not sure exactly what kind of deck they're wanting to put it in, but um, and then having the casting cost of like a white and a black, because some of the start your engine lands are colorless. So I don't know. It doesn't quite synergize that well with that. But regardless, it's an interesting card if you take out the start your engines ab- abilities here, because it is a zombie cat warrior, so it does kind of give you potentially maybe some cat synergies. Now we also have another card that works well with cats, I think. Basri, Tomorrow's Champion, which is a 1 mana 2/1 legendary human knight. You can tap 1 to exert it and create a white cat creature token with lifelink. And then you can also cycle it for 3. And it says cats you control gain hexproof and indestructible in turn. So we just got Arbo in Foundations, which is a pretty good cat lord, I would say. And both of these cards are pretty decent cards to potentially go in a cat deck. Just being able to sacrifice another creature that's going to die or something like that to surveil can be useful. Start your engines. The cat decks are fairly aggressive, so that could be useful there. Could go also in a zombie deck because they make zombie tokens, but I don't see so far a ton of zombie support, but we'll see. So interesting card. Cat decks maybe getting some upgrades with these two. Yeah, we'll see. All right. The Crypt Caller Chariot, as well as the Captain Howler Sea Scourge. I put these both on the same slide because they're kind of similar in what they are doing or what they want. The Chariot is a 4 mana vehicle with Menace Crew 2 5/5, but it says whenever you discard one or more cards, create that many tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. And then the Captain Howler is a 4 mana 5/4 War 2 and pay 2 life. It's a shark pirate, so maybe put it in a pirate deck. I don't know. It's a pretty sweet shark pirate going on there. Sharks with legs, apparently. Whenever you discard one or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until in turn for each card discarded this way. Whenever the creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you draw a card. So both of these want you to like discard a ton of cards. And there are some cards in standard that let you kind of discard any number of cards from your hand, the Brass Tunnel Grinder and as well the Elder Dragon War. So both of them could trigger these for quite a lot of discard effects because both count the number of cards that are discarded this way. So the Chariot could make a ton of black zombies this way, or the Captain Howler could make a bunch of or pump up something. And there in pirates there are quite a few flying creatures and creatures with evasion. So uh, maybe that could go in those strategies as well. Just ways to use this. I'm not sure if there's other kind of sort of like discard ways. Things with cycling also trigger discard abilities, and there are some cycling cards so far revealed in the set. So maybe that's some interesting synergy there to kind of keep an eye on as well. Um, but yeah, so just kind of interesting discard synergy here. Okay. Uh, Next up, we've got Atchitic Emerald Radiant. 6 mana. Um, I tried. Uh, Legendary creature, insect druid, and when it enters, you create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each artifact and/or creature card in your graveyard. And it's a 3/3. And it says whenever another insect you control dies, put a +1 counter on it, and each opponent loses 1 life. I think this card's actually pretty strong for like a reanimation strategy. I think that's really what you want to do. You want to just kind of fill your deck, maybe a self mill deck. You just self mill, self mill, self mill, which puts a bunch of creatures or potentially artifacts um, in the graveyard. And then you bring it back with, say, like Squirming Emergence, and it comes into play as a 3/3, and it puts like 4, 5, or 6, 7 insect creature tokens into play, um, which is pretty cool. You could potentially put a lot of insect creature tokens into play with this, and then if they die, then you get to drain your opponent. So I think it's definitely got some potential as a sort of a reanimation target, or like in a self mill strategy as a reanimation target. Pretty nice with Squirming Emergence, especially only 3 mana to get this thing back, and can really kind of you know muck up the board, basically chump block, and then sort of start to kill your opponent with if you chump block there. So kind of an interesting card. I think it's got some powerful potential. Okay, we got the Sita Varma Masked Racer, which is a 2 mana 2/3 legendary human rogue. It has exhaust with X and 3 mana to put X +1/+1 counters on it. Then you can have the base power and toughness of each other creature you control become equal to its power. So if you just did this for 3 mana, it would put all of the base powers of your creatures into 2. Not that good. So, but the more um, power, or sorry, mana you put into this, the more power it's going to become because it puts the counters on it, and then all your creatures are going to become base power that. So that's powerful if you can put a bunch of mana to it. And there are quite a few cards that add, even that Goblin we just saw earlier, but also like the Enigma Jewel, things that just add to activate abilities um, that could reduce or make this much easier to make X quite big with this, which could be a game-winning play. It's also nice with you say like Slime Against Humanity, those kinds of cards that start as like 0/0s to change their base power because that just completely pumps them. Um, so maybe some synergy there. But yeah, interesting card. I think really the key is like pump this a bunch. Again, you can put it in Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I say that a lot. So that is also another synergy with Sita Varma. Okay, next up we've got the new Chandra Spark Hunter, which is a 4 mana 4 loyalty Legendary Planeswalker Chandra. Um, and it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to one target vehicle you control. Until end of your turn, it becomes an artifact creature and gains haste. So this activates your vehicles right away, which is kind of cool, and gives them haste. +2 to sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. And if you do, you draw a card. 0 to create a 3/2 colorless vehicle artifact token with crew 1. And -7 is you get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control enters, the emblem deals 3 damage to any target. So right away, you could play this and then activate the 0, crew that 3/2 vehicle, and attack for 3. So that's something you could do, um, which isn't a great thing, but it is something you could do. You could +2 it to sort of loot or sacrifice something to draw cards. It is interesting that it does ultimate quite quickly. It comes in with 4, and then you +2 to 6, +2 again to 8, and then you can ultimate it. You could also ultimate it the turn after if you have like something with proliferate, say like a Volt Charge. Turn comes into play with you up it to 6. Next turn you just Volt Charge and then -7 right away. So that could be kind of cool. But I think the best use for this is maybe again we're gonna have to see all the vehicles we get in the set, but using it to sort of crew things for free, such as like the Weatherlight completed could be kind of cool, or like Consulate Dreadnought, which is kind of an older card. Things that are hard to crew on their own, this can kind of crew them for you every turn for free. Um, so I don't know. I'm not super impressed with this card, to be honest. Maybe I'm missing something with it. Again, I think it maybe depends on the other vehicles we have available and how good those are to see how how useful its sort of passive ability at the top is. But yeah, that's sort of the new Chandra Spark Hunter. All right, next up we've got Colodin Triumph Caster, which is a 2-mana red and white 2/3 legendary human pilot. Mounts and vehicles you control have haste, and whenever a mount you control enters, it becomes saddled until end of turn. And whenever a vehicle you control enters, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So this card, I think, is kind of like what Chandra wanted to be. This is like kind of like what Chandra does, but is 2 mana cheaper. It is a creature, of course, so it's a little different, obviously. But I think this card is powerful and can do a lot of interesting things. Like for example, with the Seraphic Steed, you could play this on 2, and then the Steed on 3, and attack with it right away as a saddled creature, and it created the Angel token with because it has haste. So there's definitely some interesting synergies if you look at all the mounts and vehicles that we have in standard. And again, of course, we're getting more vehicles. Um, this card really makes, I think, them quite good because not having to crew them and giving them haste right away is kind of two big recent vehicles aren't good. But this sort of is what would potentially make vehicles good. The belligerent is also kind of one we already have in standard. It says when attacked, you create a treasure token, and until end of turn, you can look at the top card of your library and play land cards and cast spells from the top of your library. So being able to play it right away, give it haste, and attack without even having to crew it um, is pretty powerful if you can do that. So yeah, definitely an interesting card. Something to keep an eye on for a vehicle or mount deck for sure. Um, yeah, I think this is definitely going to be an enabler if there is such a vehicle or mount deck that's decent in standard. All right. We've got the Valor's Flagship, which is a 7-mana 7/7. It's a legendary artifact vehicle. It has flying, first strike, and lifelink, and crew 3, cycling for X and 3. And then whenever you cycle the card, you create X/1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens with this token saddles, mounts, and crews vehicles as though it had power 2 or greater. So first thing I thought of was Greasefang. This is a pretty cool target for Greasefang because it can put itself into the graveyard with the cycling ability, and then you can just play the Greasefang, bring it back, crew it right away, attack for 7, comes back to your hand, then you can cycle it again and just kind of keep going, keep making more pilot tokens and attacking for 7 lifelink in the air. So that seems like that is pretty cool, pretty good synergy. Then maybe play a few of those in Greasefang potentially. In standard, we have like one last job to maybe bring this back on turn 4 could cycle it on turn 3 and then turn 4 bring it back. I don't know how good that actually is, but that is something you could do with it. But yeah, I don't know. Outside of Reesfang, and maybe there's some other ways to kind of cheat this into play. I'm not thinking about. It doesn't seem like a great card. I mean, the cycling ability is certainly interesting, um, but a bit expensive too. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments. All right. Next up, we've got Hazaret. Another Hazaret coming back. The Godseeker. 2 mana for a 5/3 legendary creature god. It's got indestructible and haste, as Hazarets tend to do. This one is start your engine, so it could go in those start your engine sort of decks. And it says one tap target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So that can kind of help your engines continue to go up by getting your creatures to deal damage, which is kind of cool. So maybe this is kind of more of like a turn 3 play where you play this, activate it, target something, attack to get in. Um, and it can't attack or block unless you have max speed. So that's huge downside, obviously. And it's like a 2-drop in a red aggressive deck that you can't attack or block with. I don't know. It just seems kind of bad to me. But maybe the start your engines deck is better than I'm giving it credit for. Um, I'm not sure. We'll have to see. I mean, obviously, if you can't attack and block with this, a 2-mana 5/3 indestructible haste is incredible. But we'll see how easy it is to get up to max speed. If you can't get up to max speed, it's not great. I was thinking of like how else could you use this card if you don't get max speed? There are quite a few cards actually in standard that care about the power of a creature, and a 2-mana 5-power indestructible creature is useful to some extent, like with the Skull Horn Nexus. The new Galta, or not the old Galta, I guess we got back, cares about the power of things. Sylvan Scavenging could like trigger, make a 3/3 raccoon every turn, Molten Monstrosity. You could fling it, things like that. Could be useful in that regard. I was trying to think of other ways to use this card. So I don't know. We'll see. Again, I'm kind of skeptical of the start your engines deck, but maybe it'll take off. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about this new Hazaret. All right. Next up, we got the Pyrewood Gearhulk, which is a 6-mana, green and red. So this is the Gearhulk cycle. I believe this is there's one of each allied color. So I think we're going to have 5 of these. This one's a 7/7 with Vigilance and Menace. And when this creature enters, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Menace until end of turn, and damage can't be prevented this turn. So kind of like this overrun effect, essentially, for your team on a creature. This guy seems okay. Doesn't seem like amazing to me. 6 mana is quite a bit for something that doesn't like this guarantee win the game. You kind of have to have a bunch of other creatures in play, but maybe there's ways to kind of cheat this out or accelerate into it. I was thinking the new Duretti would be kind of cool. This would be a decent, um, card to have with that, because if you sort of reanimated it with the Duretti, you could give it Vigilance and Menace right away. It would have 6 power if this was the largest creature, and then so it could attack for like 8, um, and then use its ability again, something like that. Puts a 7/7 into play. Maybe some like Power Stone synergies in red and green could be useful to kind of accelerate this out. Some of the creatures create Power Stones, like the Horned Stone Seeker. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there in that sort of artifact strategy, but I'm not too convinced this card is that good. Okay, next up we've got the Oil Deep Gearhulk. So this is the blue-black one. I think this card's better than at least the one before it. Not as good as the green-white one. I think the green-white one is very good. But this one is a 4/4 with lifelink and ward 1. When this creature enters, look at target player's hand. You can choose a card from that. If you do, that player discards a card and then draws a card. So kind of Vendilion Click-ish, but it does make them discard a card instead of put it on the bottom. I think that's what that card did. And you can also target yourself here. So if you want to sort of just like cycle a card or reanimate a card or something like that, you can target yourself. So that's useful. And I thought it would be kind of cool with the Abyssal Harvester. If you kind of curve those into each other, if you played that on turn 3, then this on turn 4, target your opponent if you think they have something good to bring back with the Harvester. If you have something in your own hand, you can target yourself and bring that back. And just a 4/4 lifelink ward 1 isn't bad. That does impact the board quite a bit and can be quite good against aggressive decks. So it's interesting. I'm not sure if it's quite there in standard, but maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it did see some play. It doesn't seem like incredibly powerful to me, but I think its abilities are definitely useful, and just being able to kind of pick apart your opponent's hand, I think is pretty good. So it does put the card into their graveyard too. And the other thing to note, which is interesting, you can discard lands. So if you target yourself, you could cycle a land, target your opponent. If they have a land that you want to get rid of for some reason, you could do that. So definitely interesting card. We'll see. Okay, next up we got the Repurposing Bay. So this one is, I think it's a little slow, but also combo, a lot of combo potential. So it's 3 mana artifact, sacrifice another artifact, search your library for an artifact card, mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice artifact's mana value. Put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. So there's a few different ways to use this. There could be some sort of like chain where you like get something that untaps it and they use it again, kind of like birthing pod chains used to do. I don't know, but it just costs 2 to do this, so I'm not sure if that is possible. There's other ways to use it where you have artifacts that cost a lot. Their mana cost is high, but you put them into play cheaper, essentially. Like Gate Colossus, maybe in standard. I don't know. That's the only one I can think of in standard. Or the Mirror Enforcer, Frog Mirror Enforcer. Those like cost 7, but you could get an 8 drop if you had a big 8 drop artifact in your deck that you wanted to search up with Gate Colossus, search up Portal to Phyrexia, things like that. But maybe just kind of a value engine. So artifacts that come into play, they have an effect, come into play effect, like Carrot Cake, Tithing Blade, Legion, um, Excruder. Those can kind of do something, kill a creature, create a token, and then you sacrifice them, get a 3 drop. Maybe that comes into play and does something. So just kind of like a value engine. You keep going up the chain with this. Could be interesting to see. I do feel like maybe just like a 5 mana to get 1 activation out of this is a little too slow, but it could be wrong as well. Birthing Pod was pretty broken back in the day. So um, I don't know. We'll have to see. Really had to like take a deep dive into all the artifacts, and we're going to kind of get a bunch of artifacts too in the set. And I would be surprised if this saw some play as well. All right, we've got the Quag Feast as well as Bloodgast, a reprint which is back. Quag Feast is a 2 mana sorcery. Choose target creature, planeswalker, or vehicle, mill 2 cards, and destroy the chosen permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So obviously, any with self mill strategies or even like fetch lands to fill up your graveyard, or Delirium, I was thinking this could be a pretty good card in Delirium. I think self mill strategy would probably want this, and Bloodgast is back, which really wants to be in the graveyard, so you can just play a land and get it back. So those 2 cards would probably go in the same deck. Kind of random to have Bloodgast in the set. I feel like, I don't know, maybe not. We'll see what the rest of the set is, but like a landfall ability and a vampire. I don't know if they fit with the set, but either way, kind of cool that it's back. And I think this card is going to see some play in self mill strategies, like a removal spell that also mills you for just 2 mana. I think it's pretty good. So on its own, you can destroy anything with mana value 2 or less, and then anything else later in the game, or anything you've done on turn 1 to put cards in the graveyard just makes it that much better. So it's definitely like a removal spell with like some potential upside. I think could see some play for sure. Okay, next up we've got the Agonaur Rex, which is a 5 mana 8/8 with trample, a dinosaur. So we got some dinosaur synergies coming. Cycling for 3, and whenever you cycle this card, put 2+1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature or vehicle against trample and indestructible until end of turn. So this card seems pretty decent actually. A 5 mana 8/8 trample is okay. I mean, that's certainly, I don't know if you just play it on that own. You probably wouldn't play that just on its own, but I think its cycling ability is strong. To put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature and give it trample and indestructible and draw a card. I think that kind of is the ability you would maybe use this more often. Um, so I was just thinking like maybe you go like turn 1 Lamorels, turn 2 you just pass with this up, and then they attack, you block, cycle it, give your Lamorels 2 counters, indestructible, block and kill their guy, draw a card. That could be kind of cool. Again, dinosaur synergies with the belligerent yearling, maybe in like those smuggler surprise sort of decks that want things that can, they're good to put in with smuggler surprise, which this could be, but also have another ability that you can use earlier in the game, such as the cycling ability. So I don't know. This card seems kind of sweet. Not sure if it's quite there, but I could certainly see it seeing some play in some maybe like green stompy deck or dinosaur deck or something like that. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, next up we've got the uh, Draconauts Engineer. Speaking of dinosaurs, it creates dinosaur dragon tokens. It's a 2 mana 2/2 goblin, so definitely again a relevant creature type, and has exhaust. 1 mana. Other creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then exhaust for 4 mana to create the 4/4 red dinosaur dragon creature token. I think this card's pretty decent, pretty strong. Um, Again, works good with Agatha Soul Cauldron. All these exhaust cards seem pretty good with that. And goblins already have some synergy with that card. There's other uh, cards that work well with Soul Cauldron and goblins. So yeah, I could see this seeing some play. I think just on its own, it's kind of decent because it's just like a 2 mana 2/2 that has the ability to become a 3/3 and then also make a 4/4 the next turn. And like, say you had, I don't know, if you had two of these, you play this on turn 2, turn 3, play another one, activate one of them, attack for 5. The next turn, make a 4/4 dragon. The next turn, you can make another 4/4 and give it itself give the dragon haste. The two abilities work with each other. I don't know. So I think this card it's got some potential. Definitely some pretty sweet art too. a, a goblin riding a dinosaur dragon with this rocket launcher on its back. Gotta love that. Kind of cool with like Race the Past too. I was thinking maybe the goblin deck or some sort of deck that uses the graveyard, bringing everything back and giving it haste can be pretty useful as well. So definitely an interesting, I think, powerful card. Okay, next up we've got Sabsun Luxia Luxa Embodied, 5 mana for a 6/6 legendary god, root trample and indestructible. Can't attack or block unless it has an even number of counters on it. At the beginning of your first main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on this, and then if it has an odd number of counters on it, draw 2 cards. So this card is interesting. I think pretty good actually. If you think about how this works, um, it it comes down as a reach, trample, indestructible 6/6, and it can block because it has an even um, number of counters on it, right? Which is 0 when it starts. And then, so it's pretty good having a reach indestructible blocker that can certainly stop your opponent from attacking you potentially. And then during your next turn, beginning of your first main phase, you put a counter on it, becomes a 7/7, draw 2 cards, right? Now it can't attack or block. But if you have something, any ability that puts another counter on this, any kind of counter, I think, doesn't really matter. But a +1/+1 counter, for example, with the Orny Tumblewag or any effect that puts a counter on it, then you can make it an 8/8 and it can attack or block again. So you can attack right away if you wanted to, or just leave it on defense. And then um, draw 2 cards the next turn when you put another counter on it. So it can generate a lot of card advantage. It can sort of maybe stabilize the board as well. I think this card's pretty powerful and got some potential. You can accelerate it out with Land Wells because it's green. So I kind of like it quite a bit. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, next up the Thunderus Velocipede. 3 mana for a 5/5 vehicle with trample. And each other vehicle and creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if its mana value is 4 or less. Otherwise, it enters with 3 additional +1/+1 counters on it. This card has crew for 3. I don't know. Again, I don't think it's that great. You know, putting additional +1/+1 counters on things is fine, but for 3 mana, I don't know if that's quite worth it. The only reason I want to point out this card is because it goes infinite with persist creatures like Kitchen Finks. So maybe that's someone enabler in older formats. Maybe there's some combos I'm not thinking about in standard with this. But I don't know. I just look at this and I was like, is that really worth the 3 mana of the card? It kind of doesn't do anything really to impact the board right away. You have to play additional things for it to even do anything. Um, I don't know. So that's the Thunderus Velocipede. And then this I have a kind of a whole host of cards I didn't really know what to do with or could think of any really great, interesting synergies and combos. So if you have any ideas for these, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the first one, the Verbosos, the 2 mana 0/4 homunculus. Start your engines, and it has you have no max hand size, max speed. If you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. I mean, that's obviously a powerful effect, but the problem is like this card itself is a 0/4, so it's not really getting in for any damage, like almost ever. So it really doesn't fuel the engines itself. So it's kind of a very odd card to have start your engines on. Tell me if I'm wrong or like I'm missing something, but like this doesn't seem that great to me. I don't know. And then we got Winter, which seems decent. This is a 2 mana 3/2 legend with ward pay 2 life, and artifacts you control have ward pay 2 life, so it can kind of protect itself, protect your artifacts. Maybe that's decent. And then exhaust for 4 mana, exile X artifact cards from your graveyard. Each other non-artifact creature gets -X/-X. I think that could be powerful. It does require a bit of setup. You have to have a certain amount of artifacts in your graveyard. Have to have your whole board not have artifacts, and your opponent to have non-artifacts that are equal to the minus. So it really is quite conditional, that exhaust ability. But I can see in the right circumstance be powerful. I don't know. Just on its own, it just doesn't seem like amazing to me. And then we've got the last ride, which is a 1 mana 13/13. But it gets -X/-X. X is your life total. You can pay 3 to pay 2 life to draw a card, and then crew for 2. I don't. God, again, like I just don't know. Like it's a Death Shadow. Yeah, I get it. Like that's cool, but then the Death Shadow that you have to crew to do it. So you can play on turn 1, and then you can use his ability to lose life, and then yeah, but it's just like, gosh, it just doesn't seem like what you kind of want to be doing in Magic right now. Like at least in Standard, like competitively, somewhat competitively. And I couldn't think of any way to like use the 13/13 in the corner because it's not actually a creature. It's a vehicle. So there's cards that say like equal to the power of the creature or whatever, but it's not actually a creature. So, anyways, I don't know if you have any ideas for these cards. Let me know in the comments below. But I just couldn't quite think of any creative ways to really use these right now. But again, we'll see when the full set is revealed. Maybe things will become more clear of how to use these, or I have an epiphany, or someone will help me out in the comments. All right, so I think that's it for the spoilers today for Aetherdrift. We've got a ton of cards. Thanks for sticking with me. If you watched the whole video, let me know in the comments below what you think of the set so far. Are you excited? What do you want to build? Any cool combos? Anything I missed? Of course, I love to hear ideas for cool combo decks and fun things to do with new cards. So um, thanks for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow or the next day with some more spoilers. All right, take care.